That's what.
Well, university that you go to.
Ohio State.
Ohio State.
Oh,
You
I
from
lived in
Ohio?
Menor for about a year.
Where?
Menor,
Okay.
kind of close to Cleveland.
Yeah, I didn't get out of Columbus much, but there are reasons like Ohio's fun.
It's fine. Actually, there's a candle company that sells candles based on the smell of the states, and the Ohio candle smells like nothing.
What's the most you like?
It's the scent of nothing. Oh, I don't know.
The range in incomprehensible. There are 60,000 undergrades.
Yeah.
That is more than 3 times the size of the state. That doesn't include the grad students, the med school, the law school. It's an institution. And in Ohio, everybody is a Ohio State fan. Doesn't matter if you went to college there or not. Anywhere in Ohio, there's scarlet and gray. It's giant, incomprehensibly giant.
They tried to trademark the word,
Yeah. They are.
They're the.
B-O-S-C.
I mean, Columbus is nice, but very expensive. And Ohio State is nice, but very expensive. But it's just hard to comprehend.
Do you regret going?
No, it's good school for what I wanted to do. And Columbus is a lot more affordable 15 years ago now. So I wasn't like, because I had a teaching position, but it wasn't like I'd dig out things to get from the department. So it was fun.
Is that where you want your undergrad as well?
No, I'm just here. This isn't like, what do you care? Mizzou's nice. Mizzou is a lot more like kids think. A bit bigger and a bit more money. But pretty much the same.
That's my first
Missouri.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you're not from Kansas, are you?
No, I'm not. I'm from New York.
New York? Where in New York?
Syracuse.
Oh, so how'd you end up in Kansas? It was like the opposite of Syracuse, New York, and everything.
No, well, I moved here to be near family. I got my associates from a little college, St. Mary's College, yeah.
Fantastic.
And then I took a good 6 years off. But, no, yeah, so mostly family.
Awesome. Nice. A lot of you guys do Latin. Come here and
Who have you taught? Did you teach, Caitlin Ravitch?
yes, I taught Caitlin right there.
Jody?
No, I taught, I definitely taught her Caitlin, because she just finished her master's like last year.
She did.
Yeah.
She was my roommate.
Oh, was she?
Yeah, we lived together different times.
She's very nice.
She's very smart too.
Yes, what's she doing now?
She is married with a baby on the way.
Oh, good for her. Okay. She's still in Manhattan.
No, they live in Key State. Her husband got his architecture degree here, so now he's living architecture. Yeah.
My dental hygienist's children both go to St. Mary's. Right?
Oh,
Yes. She apparently commutes every morning from St. Mary's to Manhattan. I would not do.
do you know what her name is? Because St. Mary's is a town that everybody knows.
She's very nice and she's a dental hygienist who works in Manhattan. So
So
Probably-
40 minutes from here.
yeah, it's like 35, 40 minutes.
Yeah,
And the road also is terrible, so 24 is always under construction.
it literally. No, yeah, it's a very small town. Everybody knows everybody. So that's the only reason why I asked specifically.
Yeah.
It was different than here, so kind of.
Mhm. Mhm. Hey, there's Will. That's that down, somebody.
That was.
So how's everybody's week going? Who's cranky? Be honest. Most of you cranky.
A little bit.
What do you mean by crying?
Unhappy.
Oh.
Shall we get started instead of staring at each other for 2 more minutes? Fantastic, good, Alex. Good. Good, so, where did we leave off last time? What did we conclude at the end of Tuesday? We came to a new definition, a definition of what? What did we try and figure out? Yo,
What justice is.
what justice is, and what did we come to? What was the definition we had left with? On Tuesday. Ava, you know it. No, she doesn't, that's okay.
Do good.
Give me any definition of justice that we talked about on Tuesday. Zane?
Is it? Do we end up with do good to everyone?
Mm-hmm. This is Polemicus's definition. I think it was number 3 or 4. Now I'm not sure. I'll say 4. Do good to everyone all the time. Fantastic. Now, what were the definitions that we had sort of worked our way through to get to that? What's the one we had started with?
Well, the one we heard was
This was Capitalism's that
you follow the rules, laws, basically, and be honest,
pay debts,
pay debt.
honor contracts. And Socrates had sort of been unsatisfied with that for a number of reasons, but in the end, what they decide, he and the kids decide that this was a definition for rich people. This is a definition that makes rich people happy, but maybe not anybody else. And he worked with Polemicus to nuance it a little bit. What nuancing definitions we moved through, right?
Do good to good people and like too bad. Basically, give people what they deserve. Somebody's good, do good to them. Somebody's bad, bad.
And not good people and bad people, slightly different than that. Oh, that's definition 3.
Friends and enemies.
Do good things to your friends, do bad things to your enemies. And then, Will, what was the slight nuance that we moved through?
Yeah, do good people who seem good and are good, do good people who seem bad and are good, do bad people who seem bad and are bad, do bad to people who seem good and are bad.
We're gonna put et cetera, but you're exactly right. Very good. Fantastic. And we got through a bunch of different paths, but we saw why, and what's Capitalis's deal? Well,
He's old and he's near death and he's like, yeah, I've done a lot of sexual stuff, so now I gotta make a bunch of.
he didn't say it quite that explicitly, but he's really anxious about dying and talks about his struggles with sex. We can kind of put those together pretty easily. Yes, and just sort of doing the roundup of names. Who else is in this room that we care about? Socrates is there, Cephalus is there, Polemicus is there. Thrasymachus, who hadn't said a peep the first half. And we'll get into Thrasymachus in a moment. Who are the 2 other kids that we care about? Glaucon and Adamantus. Fantastic. So Glaucon, Adamantus, Polemicus. Fantastic. Polemicus is Cephalus' son. Glaucon and Adamantus are brothers. And Socrates is here too. And then it turns out, quite forcefully as it turns out, there's been an unmentioned person sitting and listening to all of the conversation that we reached up until this point. And turns out, you guys at the end of class on Tuesday had some objections. Well, some objections. Cassidy had some objections. I keep wanting to call you Clarice, and that is not right. Fine, as long as it's with a C, that's fine. Yeah. Cassidy, sorry. Had some objections, but it turns out Thrasymachus has some objections too. So as we're picking back up, what happens? We reach this happy definition. Polemicus is happy, Socrates is happy. We've defined justice as being nice and doing good things to people all of the time. You guys had some objections, but tell me about Thrasymachus. What happens at that moment we're picking up today? We ended on a false cliffhanger or something like that. Everything was beautiful, but it's a false ending.
He gets mad at Socrates because he claims that Socrates, instead of answering questions, just likes to refute other people's opinions.
Absolutely. Tell me about Thrasymachus. How's he strike? Almost literally. Val?
He's a sophist.
Tell me more.
Oh.
What's a sophist?
Someone who follows the thought of Sophocles.
No, a sophist is somebody who is interested in wisdom. So, but that's slightly different than philosophy. We'll see there are some differences that emerge in the course of this end of first book about what those differences are. Well,
He really wants him to answer the question, and it's kind of wants to and questioning other people is easier to ask.
how many of you were like, yeah, he's kind of got a point. Socrates is kind of annoying me in the first half of this book. I mean, what are his objections? He doesn't like the way that Socrates talks. He doesn't like the way that Socrates is like interacting with the kids. What else? Like, how mad is he? Why is he so mad? He's really mad. All right, let's look and see what happens. We're on page 13. Now, Thrasymachus had many times started to take over the argument in the midst of our discussion, but he had been restrained by the men sitting near him, who wanted to hear the argument out. Here we see another feature of the dialogue. What do we find out only in retrospect has been happening ever since Calculus left? Val?
He keeps trying to interrupt, but everyone else is like, shh, I'm here.
What's Thrasymachus been doing? He's been sitting there listening to Polemachus talking to Socrates. And for the last 20 minutes, what's he been doing? Like every 30 seconds. But, right? He has been trying to interrupt for like 20 minutes, but everybody else has been telling him to shut up and wait for the right moment. What's that tell us? We're trying to build, we don't know anything about who Thrasymachus is, aside from that he's a sophist. We're trying to build an image of him. The three kids, they're younger. Socrates is a bit older. Cephalus is elderly, but gone now. We don't know much about Thrasymachus. Tell me about him. That he's sitting there, he's interrupting, he's getting pulled back down. Give me anything about him from that.
He's immediately painted as very different than the others. Like Glaucon seems very chill and is going with Socrates, but then there's Thrasymachus, who's just anxious ball of I want to jump in, I need to say something.
Fantastic. He's anxious, he's not chill. Good. But when we paused and I said this, you and I are on the same team, we've defined justice, the conversation's over. He could no longer keep quiet. Hunched up like a wild beast, he flung himself at us as if to tear us to pieces. What's he do? He's been going, meh, meh, meh. There's a lull in the conversation. What's he do?
He explodes.
He like stands up, launches himself into the middle of the dining room, and kidnaps or hijacks the conversation. So it's not just that he's not chill. He's a bit more than that. Like, what's going on with this guy?
He's pissed.
He's mad. Capital M mad. Erica?
That's showing dominance. Like,
Whoa, there's a physical aspect of this, right? Like, there's something. Erica's point is a good one. What's that tell you about his age, maybe? That he has the confidence, that's just like, boom. Val?
He's like 40s.
He's not a teenager, right? He's more confident, he's more in control, well, maybe in control, but more confident at the very least, and he's pretty passionate. Then both Polemachus and I got all in a flutter from fright. You think that's hyperbole or not?
I'm becoming freaked out.
Right? Like they're having a chill, laid back conversation about, oh, what do you think being a nice person is? And then all of a sudden, pow! Anger. And he shouted out into our midst and said, what is this nonsense that has possessed you for so long, Socrates? And why do you act like fools making way for one another? We're on 13 on the bottom, 336b. Wait, okay. His first two objections. He's been sitting there thinking the same way you guys have for the 20 minutes of the conversation up until this point. What's been pissing him off? Zane's right. He's mad. He's big mad. But what's he big mad about? Val?
He completely disagrees with the definition of justice that Socrates is given.
Absolutely. He disagrees about justice. But what's he? Yeah.
Feels like Socrates is kind of a manipulator.
Disagrees about the method that Socrates has been using. And the method that he singles out, what's he mean? Why are you guys like fools making way for one another?
Multiple things smaller than their points, they're trying to go in with the conversation and change.
They're having a conversation. What's the problem with the conversation? What does he mean, fools who make way for one another? Will?
It's not like a definitive. They aren't like, this is justice. They're like, well, maybe you could.
What does Thrasymachus want? What genre does he want? What's he pissed off at? He wants a command. He doesn't like a dialogue. He wants a speech. He wants an essay. This is a philosophical methodological difference that he has. Fantastic. If you truly want to know what the just is, don't only ask and gratify your love of honor by refuting whatever someone answers. You know that it is easier to ask than to answer, but answer yourself and say what you assert the just to be. I think maybe Valid said it.
So
He's a sophist. Give me a dang definition. You're so fancy pants, tell me what you think justice is, Socrates. We talked on Tuesday about why Socrates teaches the way he does. Why does Socrates and why does Plato write the way that he writes? Well,
Socrates is afraid of ending up, or sorry, Plato is afraid of ending up the same way that Socrates did.
absolutely. Well,
They wanna like inspire their thinking.
we want to start thinking.
And they're like, oh, it's the kind of answer, but not the right answer, not to go through.
How's that different than giving a speech or reading an essay? You're seeing what somebody else said, right?
Yeah, and then like Socrates being a professor in classical Athens is kind of used to walking around and just, like picking people's brains. And kind of gauging interests like that. As opposed to Plato's more kind of, from at least what I can tell, Plato's more of a writer. Or he like kind of writes and does his stuff and publishes it himself. As opposed to like going up to people just challenging them in the street.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cassidy?
It's
Cassidy?
interesting to like how in a speech you don't kind of defend your answers as much as you and the same way Plato is right. No one has to like stand up on his own.
So why does Thrasymachus want such a concrete answer? Thinking about all this and all this is right. What does a concrete answer let him do? Refute it, argue against it, undermine it. Fantastic. But it also doesn't offer a chance for onlookers to work on the critical thinking, or at least in the same way. Fantastic. How does Socrates respond? He's at first shocked. Well,
It's like we've been doing, I think you talked about math, and it's like 3 times 2 is 6, if you ask me what 3 plus 3 is.
right. So, because Thrasymachus ends by yelling, don't tell me that the justice is the needful or the helpful or the advantage and gainful, but tell me what it really is. And then Socrates says, I can't answer your question, because it's like you ask me, what's 12? And you say,
3 times 6 times.
you can't say 6 times 2, you can't say 3 times 4, you can't say 1 plus 1 12 times, but tell me what 12 really is. So you tell me to answer the question, you say I can't answer the question. Fantastic. To which Thrasymachus says what? Page 14. Thrasymachus listened, burst out laughing very scornfully, and said, by Heracles, here is that habitual irony of Socrates. Socrates says, well, I can't answer the question. You told me I can't answer the question, but say I have to answer the question, to which Thrasymachus laughs scornfully and says, this is Socratic irony. What's the tone of this? What's the tone of everything Thrasymachus is doing? He thinks he's better, and if he's laughing scornfully at Socrates, he thinks he's stupid. He thinks he's higher up than Socrates. This is what kind of encounter is this? What's the tone of this encounter? Hostile, at least from Thrasymachus' side. But wait, let's read the next sentence. I knew it, and I predicted to these fellows that you wouldn't be willing to answer, that you would be ironic and do anything rather than answer if someone asked you something. Whoa. What sort of unanswered question from Tuesday does this let us answer? What's been planned out?
The kidnapping of of Socrates.
What was we now understand, what was the reason that the kids kidnapped Socrates on Tuesday?
So that Symmachus could, attack him, so to speak.
Ambush him,
Yeah.
absolutely. This is a bet. Well, we need to think in mind, so the kids know Thrasymachus. They had talked with Thrasymachus about getting him in the same room with Socrates, seemingly to talk about justice. We don't know what the kids want yet. We know what Thrasymachus feels about it. He thinks Socrates is an idiot and wants to have a chance to yell at him. But we don't know what the kids want yet. We're still thinking about it. There's some wiggling. There's some back and forth. Who gives the first definition of justice? What's Thrasymachus' definition of justice?
That it's nothing more than the advantage of the stronger.
What does he mean by that? The advantage. In fact, notice. Very good, Val. He says, now listen, I say that the just is nothing other than the advantage of the strong. Well, why don't you praise me? But you won't be willing. Again, this is hyper hostile. What does it mean, the advantage of the strong? Right?
Justice is whatever the people in power want to be.
Justice is whatever the people in power want it to be. What does that mean? Socrates asks a follow-up question, which Thrasymachus says is disgusting. What's the follow-up question?
It's like power.
Power controls what justice. Socrates asks the follow-up question, do you mean that a wrestler is more just than I am because he's got bigger muscles? Thrasymachus says, don't be disgusting, you weirdo. That's not what I mean. I mean precisely that the political constitution of whatever city you're talking about determines what justice is. What are some examples that he lists for this?
Democracy, tyranny, and aristocracy.
Democracy, tyranny, aristocracy, fantastic. And that in democracies, who's in charge? Not your question. Who's in charge of democracies? The majority, the working class. Who's in charge of aristocracies? The aristocrats and tyrannies? One guy. Exactly right. And so what? So there are different constitutions and different systems. How does that have anything to do with justice according to Thrasymachus? The system makes justice. What is he defining justice as? Yes, the advantage of the stronger, but what's he sort of imagining justice is and to a government? He's sort of conflating justice and laws. I think absolutely. How do you feel about Thrasymachus' definition? I mean, we've been moving so far in this conversation in a destination that kind of left everybody dissatisfied on Tuesday, but we've sort of taken a strong left turn, if you like. As a response to everything that you guys were listening to and thinking about and talking about on Tuesday, how does Thrasymachus' response strike? Well,
I mean, it's a bit of a I feel like it's not actually doing the definition of what justice is. As well, the people in power with the rules, so those are. And yeah, not actually being like, well, it actually is next one, even if it is poorly by those.
fantastic. Somebody else is awesome. Well, okay. Anybody? Yeah.
I kind of agree with the call out. I just feel like they're answering two different things. Like maybe Socrates' idea of justice is like what it should be, and then Thrasymachus is like how it's being used, like how it's being like presented in the current world.
And knowing that he's talking about democracies, republics, oligarchies, whatever, that's another difference between what Socrates and Polemachus are talking about and what Thrasymachus is talking about. How to be a just person, what's Thrasymachus talking about?
Politics.
Politics and like the state. He's not even really answering the same question. Was he listening? Not sure. He might not have been listening as well as we were to what was going on, because he answers angrily, interruptingly in a way that upsets everybody at the table. And that kind of doesn't answer the right question. Was he listening? Not entirely clear. Or if he was listening, did he care? Socrates, of course, starts picking this answer apart. How does he start picking Thrasymachus' definition apart? Well,
So Thrasymachus view marks injustice as a virtue.
We'll get there eventually.
Oh.
Yes, that's where we end up. But the first thing he asks is, do people in power ever make mistakes? What's the significance of that? Thrasymachus answers, yes, of course, people in power occasionally make mistakes.
They're trying to find out like a baseline of what justice is, and if the person in power is thinking things if you make a mistake, that's not really the base of what justice is.
Well, and it doesn't make sense coherently because, okay, we're in a tyranny. Tyrants make laws to benefit themselves, right? I'm the tyrant, I'm the sole person in charge, I make these laws, and Thrasymachus says, okay, in a tyranny, you as the subject of the tyrant have to do what the tyrant says, and that is just. Socrates asks, well, does the tyrant ever make a mistake in passing a law that isn't actually to his advantage? And Thrasymachus, of course, has to say yes. What's the consequence of that for justice?
It's you're doing injustice by doing justice.
Right? If you obey the law of a tyrant that is actually not the tyrant's interest, you are obeying the law, but by Thrasymachus' definition, you are doing injustice by agreeing with what the tyrant says. So it's a contradiction. So what's the solution? If you're the subject of a tyrant, what is the only way to do justice? Every now and then you've got to disobey the tyrant and ignore the laws that aren't actually in the tyrant's interest. How does that strike? Right? Right? Deadly, confusing, and complicated. So this forces Thrasymachus into a slightly new definition of justice. What's that?
Doesn't he say like they harm rulers when they make mistakes?
Excellent.
Shifts.
Exactly. Thrasymachus introduces the notion of skills being unique to professions, if you like. You don't think of a doctor being a doctor if she makes a mistake. You don't think, in as much as that's not an aspect of medicine, right? That's what the position that he lands on. He says, and this is Thrasymachus. Thrasymachus says, to take an obvious example, it's page 18. Do you call a man who makes mistakes about the sick a doctor because of the very mistake he is making? Or a man who makes mistakes in calculation, a skilled calculator, at the moment he is making a mistake in the sense of his mistake? His point being what? When a tyrant or a ruler or a constitution or a government or whatever makes a mistake, they're not, it's like inconsistent. They're not acting like a tyrant or ruler. So no craftsman, wise man, or ruler makes mistakes at the moment when he is ruling, although everyone would say that the doctor made a mistake and the ruler made a mistake. So he's saying there's a difference between the colloquial way that we talk about things and the reality. Now, it's not a very good definition, but it's one Thrasymachus introduces, and this is the one that sinks his argument, right? He introduces a bad argument. So his definition, too, is advantage of the stronger that is actually to the advantage of the stronger. Right. Socrates, of course, then launches into tearing this apart as well. He says, well, so Socrates asks, okay, bottom of 18, that's where I want. Make it clear whether that you meant by the ruler and stronger, the man who is such only in common parlance, or the man who is such in precise speech, whose advantage you said a moment ago will be just for the weaker to serve because he is strong. The one who is ruler in the most precise sense. Do harm to that and play the sick hand if you can. I ask for no favors, but you won't be able to. Do you suppose me to be so mad as to try to shave a lion and play the sycophant with you? I'm not fucking with you, right? Like, I'm just trying to take you seriously and understand what you're saying. At least you tried just now, although you were a non-entity at that too. Enough of this. Now tell me, is the doctor, in the precise sense, which is the bad definition that Thrasymachus introduced, but is the doctor in the precise sense of whom you recently spoke, a moneymaker or one who cares for the sick? Speak about the man who is really a doctor. What's the only way Thrasymachus can answer this question? That's the purpose of a doctor. Pilot of a ship, what's his job? Pilot a ship. Is it to make money? Not in so much as he is a pilot of a ship, right? The job of a pilot of a ship is not to make money. The job of a pilot of a ship is to steer a ship. Horse trainer? Train horses. Fantastic. And why is Socrates asking these questions, going off in a different direction? What's the natural conclusion about any leader or adjustment? They have to be good at ruling, but for what purpose do they rule? For the rule, in the same way that what's the job of a horse trainer? It's to race horses, take care of horses. The job of a pilot, steer the ship, take care of a ship. Job of a doctor, take care of sick people. It's not to make money. Therefore, what's the job of a ruler of a city? As Eric said precisely, it is to take care of the people in the city. Why is this a problem for Thrasymachus? What does he mean by the advantage of the stronger? Will?
What the king does is an advantage. The king becomes the king.
What does Thrasymachus imagine a king or a tyrant is doing with all of that? Why is he so excited about politics? What does he think he can get out of politics? Anything he wants, and who's going to pay for the privilege? Right. So we have, by the advantage of the stronger, the person with power gets to do whatever they want to the people they're in charge of, and the people they're in charge of can't do anything about it. This is dark and disturbing, but this is the point. By talking about pilots and doctors, why is Socrates destabilized?
Because in that sense, any other job would just be you being able to do whatever you want to the people. So like a doctor's job would be they can do whatever they want to sick people, or a captain's job would be they can do whatever they want to on the ship.
And it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So if a doctor, they gotta take care of the sick people, or they're not even sort of a doctor. Same with a pilot, same with a horse trainer. The leader of a city? Thrasymachus is pushed to accept the notion that the only purpose that somebody would lead a city is to be in charge of taking care of the people who live in that city. Bottom of 20, Socrates says, therefore, Thrasymachus, there isn't ever anyone who holds any position of rule, insofar as he is a ruler, and again, that was Thrasymachus' definition, who considers or commands his own advantage, rather than that of what is ruled and of which he himself is the craftsman. And it is looking to this and what is advantageous and fitting for it that he says everything he does and does everything he does. We have reached a second conclusion. Has Thrasymachus been defeated? He doesn't think so. Does Socrates think so? Socrates thinks so. Exactly. Because if the job of a king is to take care of everybody in the city perfectly, what does that actually mean the advantage of the stronger is? The advantage of the people that are under the rulers. He's flipped Thrasymachus around. When we came to this point in the argument, and it was evident to everybody that the argument about the just had turned around in the opposite direction, what we were just saying, Thrasymachus got the rug pulled out from under him. Thrasymachus, instead of answering, said, tell me, Socrates, do you have a wet nurse? All right, for those who don't know, what's a wet nurse as opposed to a dry nurse?
A wet nurse is when your mother is not nursing you, breastfeeding you, so another woman is appointed to breastfeed you.
Yes, nurses today don't get called dry nurses anymore, but they were an original split off from wet nurses, right? So a wet nurse is a woman who is paid to nurse somebody else's kids. Whoa, what's Thrasymachus asking? Are you literally a dumb, stupid baby? Do you have a wet nurse who is nursing you because you have not yet been weaned? Why this? I said. Shouldn't you answer instead of asking such things? Socrates' point is what? The hell?
You're doing the same thing you got mad at me.
Oh, tell me more. That's
So
awesome, right?
when he got mad, or when Thrasymachus first joined the argument, his claim was that Socrates doesn't actually answer questions, he just refutes other people's questions, or like refutes other people's questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that Socrates has actually like destroyed his argument, he's doing the same thing.
Yes, absolutely. Thrasymachus says, because you know your wet nurse neglects your sniveling nose and doesn't give it the wiping you need, since it's her fault you do not even recognize sheep or shepherd. Okay, building up what Will said, he's even getting nastier. What's he saying about Socrates? It's not just that he's a stupid, dumb baby. He's inept. He is literally unable to take care of himself. He's such a stupid, dumb baby. He needs his wet nurse to blow his nose and pat him on the bottom and send him to a nap. Because he doesn't know about sheep and shepherds? What kind of answer is this?
I mean, the ruler is the shepherd, and it seems like how, like, you have to separate, like, the sheep or the people they're ruling, and they don't have the control. So, like, he's trying to say that the sheep are actually the shepherds.
Mm-hmm. Or that shepherds only exist to take care of sheep and make sure that sheep grow up big and strong and healthy. And precisely that. He says, because I have a question. Before we get on to the sheep and shepherds and blowing Socrates' nose, who is Thrasymachus? Like, what's going on? Like, who is this guy? Why is he in this room with Adamantus, Polemarchus, and Glaucon? Why are they conspiring to get Socrates in this room together? Erica?
They all control or something in my mind.
How so?
No, Marcus.
Mm-hmm.
And then Glaucon and Adamantus are prepped for some kind of building.
Prepped by who?
Don't remember. Parents?
Parents don't do that sort of thing. Glaucon, Adamantus, Polemarchus, they're around 20. They've been hanging out with Thrasymachus. How old did we say he was? Older, 30s, 40s maybe. They've been talking about, what sorts of things have they been talking about? Based on the thing that Thrasymachus said about Socrates. I knew Socrates would say this when we talked about him before. What have they been hanging out talking about? Well,
I mean, it kind of maybe because like he's talking about how he's better than Socrates, and he's telling them that he's gonna be stupid and actually well, he's like racked them to be, and I'm actually better and smarter a little bit. That's what
It also sounds like they're trying to talk about philosophy and how it might tie into politics.
and justice now, I thought. And I think Eric said it. What is Thrasymachus? Thrasymachus is their teacher. What is he teaching them? What is he preparing them to be? Politicians, right? These are 3 20-ish-year-old men who are more or less affluent, more or less from aristocratic backgrounds. They're being prepped for being politicians by Thrasymachus. So we'll come back and think about this. Thrasymachus says, you're an idiot, Socrates, because you suppose shepherds or cowherds consider the good of the sheep or the cows and fatten them and take care of them, looking to something other than their master's good and their own. So you also believe that the rulers in the cities, those who truly rule, think about their rule differently from the way a man would regard sheep. And that night and day they consider anything else than how they will benefit themselves. Back to, I think, what Will said, what is at the core of Thrasymachus' view of politics? Why does somebody do politics? Benefit themselves at the expense of the people that they rule. This is a very common notion about politics. And you are so far off about the just and justice and the unjust and injustice that you are unaware that justice and the just are really someone else's good. The advantage of the man who is stronger and rules, and a personal harm to the man who obeys and serves. Injustice is the opposite. It rules the truly simple and just. And those who are ruled do what is advantageous for him who is stronger, and they make him who they serve happy, but themselves not at all. So he's elaborated a little bit on his definition. Advantage of the stronger is justice and, well, wait, is it justice? Wait, what's he saying now? What's justice? Advantage of the stronger, what's injustice? The condition of the people in the city that's being ruled by a tyrant. What's injustice for them, according to him? Somebody else is what?
Good.
Working for somebody else is good, making yourself unhappy to make somebody else happy. If you flip over to 22, he says, so Socrates, injustice, when it comes into being on a sufficient scale, is mightier, freer, and more masterful than justice. And as I have said from the beginning, the just is the advantage of the stronger, and the unjust is what is profitable and advantageous for oneself. He's getting a little confused, isn't he? What's he saying justice is at this moment? The advantage of the stronger. But he says unjust is what is profitable and advantageous for oneself. What did he just say injustice was a moment ago? He just said a moment ago it's like working class people working to support rich guys, right? But now what's he saying injustice is? He's accidentally switched his definition. What's he saying it is now at the end of his speech? So a ruler is both just and unjust in his terms. Justice is doing what a rich guy says, and the rich guy gets to do injustice, which is making himself rich and having pleasure at the expense of people in his power. When Thrasymachus had said this, he had it in mind to go away, just like a bathman, after having poured a great shower of speech into our ears all at once. But those present didn't let him and forced him to stay put and present an argument for what had been said. And I too on my own begged him to stay. Wait. Thrasymachus just explodes in this definition of justice. And then what's he trying to do? He tries to run away. Why is he trying to run away? Maybe he knows he's wrong. He's the actual baby. This is just basic projection. Tell me, okay, wait a second. I'm going to a slightly bigger board.
I mean, honestly, though, if we're looking at like justice is the lower class people, injustice can be done by the upper class people, and Thrasymachus is one of the higher people, even for the great ones.
Absolutely. We'll come back to that in a moment. Let's take a pause and think about differences between Socrates and Thrasymachus as teachers. Yeah?
Socrates tends to ask to get the feel of what his students think. Thrasymachus just kind of imposes his ideas onto his students.
Fantastic.
There's a dialogue and speech.
Fantastic.
Socrates is rather calm and knows how to respond when people like criticize him, but when Thrasymachus starts getting criticized and his arguments start getting taken apart, it kind of panics. He doesn't have like the composure that Socrates has.
How does Thrasymachus react when Socrates has a counter? Some of you are taking philosophy classes and are philosophy majors. So yes, somebody is. Maybe not. Having a counter argument is kind of like conversation 101. How does he respond every time Socrates has a contradiction to his thoughts? Well,
You're a little baby.
you're a little baby, you're a dumb idiot, shut the hell up. So it's not just, he is badly composed, angry, and panicked, but tell me more about him as a teacher.
Juvenile. When you're arguing with someone and they don't agree with you, it's like, well, you're just a baby.
Literally, he says you're just a dumb baby who needs to blow its nose, right? Tell me about what that tells you about the way that he has been teaching Glaucon, Adeimantus, and Polemarchus. Okay?
Sisyphus, he's paid to do the teaching, so he's just used to talking to them, and that's, yeah.
Talking at them, and that, in fact, we noticed that he maybe wasn't even very good at listening to what Polemarchus and Socrates have been saying. He's maybe not a good listener.
On soccer pieces for learning. You're on soccer.
Fantastic, good. So. Well, what did we decide that he was probably teaching them? What's his topic area? Politicians, politics. Anybody want to try and fill in the gaps about what maybe he's been teaching Telemachus, Glaucon, and Adeimantus? Based on everything that we've gotten up until this point? Like, yeah, he's teaching them politics, but what kind of politics has he been teaching them? Will?
Like very self-serving politics, not a good politics. But good benefit of itself.
Tell me more. Like, he has some really concrete examples about what politicians should do. What's he been pushing these kids to do once they get elected to office?
Work for their own advantage.
Work for their own advantage? And that's both good and just? What else?
All the sheep. All of
People
the
are sheep.
people are sheep and then.
And what do you do to sheep? What do shepherds actually do to sheep often? Kill them, eat them, sell them. Oh, wait. Okay, so what's that sheep metaphor that he deploys? Tell us about the way that he views normal people.
Much lower, they're lower class, they're lower.
For his own utility.
The only like justification or like need that he has to take care of them is just so that they can further serve his own interests.
Yes, you fatten sheep up until they're fat enough that they're a tasty dinner. That's why you have, that's what you do as an elected official in office. Fantastic. But Cassidy, mentioned selling, I'm sorry. Mentioned selling, or maybe I mentioned selling, either way. These aren't just any folks. These are 20-year-old rich aristocratic kids that we're talking about. So what else is on the table? They're maybe going to get elected to office, but what else is going on in their lives in the 5th century in Athens? Oh, they own slaves. Tell me more.
Slaves definitely are. I mean, not my opinion, the slaves in their.
Understood.
No, but they're not considered people, so you need to treat them like pawns.
And all of the various ranges of benefiting oneself from slaves includes a lot of really bad stuff, right? And who else is maybe on the table? We got citizens, sorry. Oh, they may get married someday with all of the same consequences that Cassidy talked about for slaves. In fact, tell me Thrasymachus's ideal adult citizen name. How does he treat everybody in his life?
Lesser than himself.
Lesser than himself. The more he harms them, the more just he is what the 3 kids have been hearing from Thrasymachus.
Yeah, so like I feel work last man, a guy that just works for him.
And
Lives their life and to serve him.
and maybe isn't even free anymore. Like the ideal man might be a pack of like slaves serving at his every whim because he's cool or because he has power. How do the kids feel about this? Cassidy?
I mean, obviously with the conversation, like they don't fully pick it up yet because like Socrates had a whole conversation where like they were coming to the idea of what justice is, that was like doing good to people. So they might not be fully like brainwashed.
Will and Erica?
I mean, they were also telling him to like shut up and Socrates talk.
Erica?
Maybe the whole point of it brought Socrates there. Socrates gives no.
Right. Is Thrasymachus the type of guy who's gonna want to sit down to have a nice conversation with Socrates? This idea did not come from him. It must have come from the 3 kids. Cassidy?
This could make an implication for talking about Plato and his actual area about how like maybe the next generations are starting to hand out that old idea to start following.
One hopes, right?
Well, that's
Or
what he wants.
one has to reform education somehow. I mean, put yourself in the kid's position. On one hand, Thrasymachus' politics are kind of nasty, but on the other hand, very traditionally patriarchal, right? Men are here to take advantage of everybody else, women, slaves, non-citizens, and serve their own whims at the expense of everybody else. There's something very traditionally aristocratic, right? And they've been there for days, weeks, months, paying Thrasymachus to learn what about politics? More, hurt people more. And to some degree, they keep going back and they keep paying him. But on the other hand, can we get Thrasymachus and Socrates in room together? Because what Socrates do? What Socrates think? Even if you just heard about him in the marketplace before, what's Socrates' basic deal? How should a person live their life? In many ways, he's the anti-Thrasymachus. So out of all of the Athenians that they trick into a room with Thrasymachus, it's Socrates. What do the kids want? It's not just to hear Socrates have a conversation with Thrasymachus. What do they want to hear? Is Thrasymachus right that hurting people is just? Is Thrasymachus right that taking advantage of people is just? People say that, but maybe if Socrates, who's like Mr. Anti that, gets in a room and we hear a conversation, get involved in the conversation, either we can leave that being committed murder, rape, assassin, killers, / embezzlers, or maybe we're going to sort of take a different direction in things. There's the table for some 20-year-old, not quite college students, that it's not invented for another generation, but future politicians and aristocrats and slave owners and husbands and fathers. There's a lot on the table. So how does Socrates then, as angry as Thrasymachus is, start chewing apart Thrasymachus's definition of the advantage of the stronger? As angry as he is, Socrates keeps plugging away at him. He asks him to elaborate on his claims, absolutely, and he does a little bit. Notice that he has to go over again, is the job of a ruler to rule or to make money and or to advantage himself, and we introduce the idea that anybody in any position needs wages, and Socrates takes that to mean that nobody's willing to do things for free, which is both true and also not true, but of course that's kind of the argument at this moment to sort of poke at Thrasymachus. But then if we look at 24, in the middle of the page, Socrates, with resistance, gets Thrasymachus to agree that people don't work for free and people don't make money as part of their core job, which is again the definition that Thrasymachus introduced. And Socrates says then this benefit, getting wages, is for each not a result of his own art, but if it must be considered precisely, the medical art produces health, and the wage earner's art wages. The house builder's art produces a house, and the wage earner's art following upon wages. And so it is with all the others, each accomplishing his own work and benefits that which it has been set over. And if pay were not attached to it, would the craftsman derive benefit from the art? It doesn't look like it. So particular skills are skills in a thing, not in making money. And Thrasymachus so far can't wiggle his way out of it. Now, the last direction that he takes, because everybody gets kind of frustrated. And so on 26, they start the argument over at the top of the page. Come now, Thrasymachus, I say. Answer us from the beginning. Do you assert that perfect injustice is more profitable than justice when it is perfect? So we're refreshing the argument. Most certain. Oh, sorry, I most certainly do assert it. He said, and I've said why. Well then, how do you speak about them in this respect? Surely you call one of them virtue and the other vice. So Socrates is going to try and resolve this disagreement through an analogy. We've been talking about just and unjust, so let's see if we can talk about vice and virtue. That's like you agreeable. Sorry. Of course. Then do you call justice virtue and injustice vice? That's likely, you agreeable man, when I also say that injustice is profitable and justice isn't. So Thrasymachus hasn't moved a bit. What then? The opposite. Is justice then vice? No, but very high-minded innocence. Do you call injustice corruption? No, rather good counsel. So Thrasymachus is kind of screwing with it. Socrates says, do you call justice vice or virtue and injustice vice? And Thrasymachus screws with him, and but he says, what? What is justice and what is injustice? What's he mean that justice is high-minded innocence and injustice is good planning?
For the justice one, it's like in a like a perfect world where they're not politics and doing this, but like good planning, good counsel, you're actually like, okay, let me do this.
Better to hurt others than to be hurt yourself, and only again a stupid dumb baby would ever want to think about an ideal world. Fantastic. Are the unjust, in your opinion, good as well as prudent? Yes, those who can do injustice perfectly, he said, and are able to subjugate cities and tribes of men to themselves. You perhaps suppose I'm speaking of pickpockets. Now then, such things too are profitable when one gets away with them, but they aren't worth mentioning compared to those that I was talking about. Okay, you can be a pickpocket, but what's a better way to do injustice? What's he mean subjugating tribes and cities of men? Conquest. Conquest. The more injustice you can do, the better it is and the more profitable. Yeah, you can be like a bank robber, but better to be a politician in charge of an invading army. As to that, I'm not unaware of what you want to say, but I wondered about what went before, that you put injustice in the camp of virtue and wisdom, and justice among their opposites. So Thrasymachus has said what? We've got, I'm going to, here. So we've got wisdom. What's a nice antonym for wisdom?
Ignorance.
Ignorance, even nicer. Ignorance. And he says prudence. What's the opposite of prudence? Is imprudence a word?
Yes.
I'll take it. Fantastic. But Socrates says that Thrasymachus has put injustice in this category, right? And justice in this category. And that's what we're going to talk about now. And this is going to be what ends up sinking Thrasymachus. He says, in your opinion, this is on page 27 towards the top, would the just man be willing to get the better of the just man in anything? What does that mean? Would the just man be willing to get the better of the just man in anything? How do just people treat each other? And fairly. Yeah, yeah, fairly. You're not going to get a just man who's like trying to knife another just man for his wallet in the back alley, right? Not at all. Thrasymachus said. Otherwise, he wouldn't be the urbane innocent he actually is. He's of course still being insulted. And what about this? Would he be willing to get the better of the just action? Not even of the just action. And does he claim he deserves to get the better of the unjust man and believe it to be just, or would he not believe it to be so? So, does a just man try and take advantage of an unjust? Sorry, get the better of an unjust. Does a just judge try and punish an unjust person? That's what he's talking about. Do just people try and do better than unjust people? Thrasymachus answers yes. He'd believe it to be just, and he'd claim he deserves to get the better, but he wouldn't be able to. To ask this question another way, would you prefer to hire a just and honest lawyer or an unjust and dishonest lawyer? That's the question that Thrasymachus is saying, is the answer. Of course, a just person would want to get better of an unjust person, but you'd want to hire an unjust criminal lawyer who'd do everything possible to get you off, right? That's Thrasymachus' position. That, I said, is not what I'm asking, but whether the just man wants and claims he deserves to get the better of the unjust and not of the just man. He does. And what about the unjust man? Does he claim he deserves to get the better of the just man and the just action? So, just people don't try and hurt just people. They try and do better than unjust people. Unjust people, what unjust people? Hurt everybody for their own benefit, both just people and unjust people. And that's exactly the Thrasymachus' follower. Fantastic. Let us say it then as follows. The just man does not get the better of what is like, but what is unlike. While the unjust man gets the better of like and unlike. What you said is very good. And I said, is the unjust man both prudent and good, while the just man is neither? That's good too. Then is the unjust man also like the prudent and good, while the just man is not like them? He's sticking with this position. How could he not be like such men, since he is such as they, while the other is not like them? Fine. Then is each of them such as those to whom he is like. What else could they be? He insists this is the case. So Socrates takes another stab at it. All right, Thrasymachus, do you say that one man is musical and that another is unmusical? I do. Which is prudent and which is thoughtless? Surely the musical man is prudent and the unmusical man thoughtless. Thrasymachus has lost this argument. He has not realized it yet. Socrates is trying to get him to realize that he's lost the argument. Then in the things in which he is prudent, is he also good? And those in which he is thoughtless, bad? Yes. What about a medical man? Is it not the same with him? It is the same. Then, you best of men, is any musical man who's tuning a lyre, in your opinion, willing to get the better of another musical man in tightening and relaxing the strings? Or does he claim he deserves more? Now, this is a weird question at first, but what's he asking? You have two equally musical musicians sitting next to each other, and they're both tuning their guitar. What are both equally good musical musicians going to do at that moment? Not your question, it's kind of a weird question. They're both tuning their guitar. What's their goal? To get it tuned. And if one's having a little bit of trouble, what's the other musical musician probably going to do? Help him. Because there is a particular skill, they want music to go well. But does he claim he deserves more? Does any musical musician ever try and tune his guitar better than everybody else so that his guitar sounds just that slightly better when they're jamming together? Why?
Because you do it poorly, and you try to sound better than the other person together.
Exactly. We're all in it together when it comes to music. Not in my opinion. Thrasymachus agrees with Cassidy. But the better of the unmusical man? Necessarily. You've got a rap battle or battle of the bands. Does the better band try and win? Why? Does the worst band want to win? Are they going to? Probably not. Why not? Because they're at least worse. Very good. And what about a medical man? On questions of food and drink, would he want to get the better of a medical man or medical action? If you ever get a second opinion from a doctor, is that second doctor going to be telling you something different just to get it over on the first doctor? You hope not, at least. And to the degree that he or she is a good doctor, they're probably not going to do that, right? And if two doctors consult with each other, are either of them going to try and trick the other just so they look better? Again, you hope not, at least. But why not? What's the job of a doctor? Take care of the person, not to be doctor number one, right? But the better of what is not medical. If you go to a second opinion and your first doctor was a quack, what's the second doctor going to do? Buddy, you have a cold, you don't need your legs, right? Like, that's a bad diagnosis. Now, for every kind of knowledge and lack of knowledge, see if, in your opinion, any man at all who knows chooses voluntarily to say or do more than another man who knows, and not the same as the man who is like himself in the same action. In other words, doctors, musicians, horse trainers, pilots, farmers, what do they all do? Inasmuch as they are competent at their craft. He's extending what we just said about musicians and doctors to all crafts. Is a doctor going to try and rip off another equally good doctor? Is another musician going to try and rip off another? Farmers, fishermen, pilots, whatever. Like a good pilot's not going to give bad advice to another pilot so his ship sinks, right? That's what he's saying. Perhaps he said it is necessarily so. And what about the ignorant man? Would he not get the better of both the man who knows and the man who does not? Perhaps. The man who knows is wise. I say so. And the wise man is good. I say so. Then the man who is both good and wise will not want to get the better of the like, but of the unlike and opposite. Where is this going? What has Socrates just proved? Ava? Sorry, you're grinning like you're, this is the second time. Sorry. No. What has he proved? What is the one thing out of order on this list that we put together? Because what does Thrasymachus agree that the unjust man will try and do? Everybody. It seems so. But the bad and unlearned will want to get the better both of the like and the opposite. It looks like. Then Thrasymachus, I said, does our unjust man get the better of both like and unlike? Weren't you saying that? I was. And the just man will not get the better of like, but of unlike? Yes. Then I said, the just man is like the wise and the good, but the unjust man like the bad and unlearned. So what do we have to do? What has Thrasymachus been forced to agree to?
Injustice is not a virtue.
That injustice is not a virtue. And what is injustice like? Or injustice like? Being uneducated, being a bad doctor, being a bad musician, being ignorant, being imprudent, being bad and wicked. What does Thrasymachus do? Socrates says, Thrasymachus did not agree to all of this so easily as I tell it now, but he dragged his feet and resisted, and he produced a wonderful quantity of sweat. Why is he sweating so hard? Why is he resisting? And then I saw what I had not yet seen before. Thrasymachus blushing. Why is he blushing, Cassidy?
He is just and everything he does is admitted that he is something that
More than that. More than that. You're absolutely right. But why he's blushing? This dude, first moment in the conversation, what was he doing? Screaming and hollering and imposing himself like some incredibly confident boxer in an argument. Erica, then Ryan?
He got clowned on.
He got clowned on. What did he think was going to happen this day? Socrates never answers any questions. He only asks questions. I'm going to show up, give my beautiful speech, walk away, and everybody's going to be dazzled by my razzle dazzle. He got clowned on, right?
He's embarrassed, yeah, because he basically what we just talked about, but also that like it seems like the one answer that Socrates was able to give out was the one that just completely destroyed his argument.
Well, Socrates will occasionally answer questions, won't he?
Well,
Yeah, but only to destroy to Thrasymachus in this moment. Fantastic. But it's more than that. It's so much worse. How does he make a living, Thrasymachus? What did he just admit to?
he's been teaching the wrong thing.
He's a bad teacher, and he's more than just a bad teacher. Go back to what Cassidy said about sheep and shepherds. What did he accidentally admit that he believes? Why does any man, according to Thrasymachus, do anything? To use everybody else's name.
Just thinking like, even his students are lesser than him.
Why why does he blush? What does he realize he's admitted? Not only that he's unjust and incompetent, but he accidentally admitted in a room full of his own students what? Why does he teach?
For his own advantage and not for theirs.
Yes, he teaches to exploit, take money from, take advantage of, and harm for his own benefit and pleasure his students. That's why he charges them tuition every day. That's why he spends time with them. Why is he blushing? It's so much worse than any one of these things. What has happened to Thrasymachus?
He's just been made a fool.
Such a fool. Why has he been made a fool? Lots of people make arguments about might is right and the advantage of the powerful. What are the issues we've seen? Plato, as our author, is not a character in this text, is not narrating the story. What are the issues so far that we're seeing Plato pointing to in this discussion of justice, but as we're also realizing pedagogy, education, teaching? What do we see going on? Yeah.
Students realizing the way they think.
Absolutely. All right. Let's put together some pedagogy. Pros, cons. So, students taking an active engagement in education. What does Thrasymachus prefer instead of students taking an active role in their education?
Obedience.
Obedience and silence. Good. What else? Give me something. Well,
Like thinking for yourself, part of the.
you said hive mind? Yeah, that's the thing. Socrates, as we've been seeing, and Plato too, are interested in teaching critical thinking skills. What's Thrasymachus doing?
People.
It's more in the category of like indoctrination than why does Thrasymachus teach? We hope it's only to make money, but his narration opens a wide range of horrifying possibilities about why he teaches, including being able to hang out with like 20-year-old dudes, right? In varieties of ways. Why Socrates teach? For the sake of wisdom, so it's selfish?
No, okay, well, no, to better the mind of anyone, to bring wisdom to anyone's mind.
Erica,
Positive that that's like.
you tell me.
Well, I mean, like, it'd be nice to like, it's like super awesome and unselfish, but like also, what he's teaching would include terrible on here on that. So like, you know, it means it's selfish.
Well, you think he wants me to be made like king of Athens?
I don't know. You know what, baby? I don't know, I just, it's,
You have a little cynical holdout feeling.
yeah, you know, like, you can't just expect this like super good guy to be super great unless like we have some evidence of that.
Say, part of it just gives off like establishment versus anti-establishment teachings. It's kind of Thrasymachus teaching this very pro aristocratic kind of uphold system, and Socrates' whole shtick is kind of questioning things.
Like, good, maybe he's doing that for his own good, but like also like could manipulate it.
Absolutely. Why does Socrates at least say he does everything he does? Based on just book one. Erica? Oh, sorry. Head scratches are always dangerous. Why does Socrates do anything?
But does he want to learn as well? He doesn't claim to have the answers, so he's trying to find them to these questions.
He at least
could learn.
Sorry?
So others could learn.
so others can learn. I mean, he at least seems to be making the argument that he's trying to be a just person. And none of you liked the definition of the just person that we ended the class with on Tuesday. But what was that definition? Benefiting everybody all the time. What are some ways that Socrates could, to Will's point of the like punching a guy in the face, was very prescient actually. What are some various ways that Socrates could have responded to Thrasymachus in this difficult conversation? Go against justice. What he said justice was he could agree, even though like this is less easy than just agreeing and like avoiding social anxiety and stuff like that. But Thrasymachus was ready to throw down. What could Socrates have done? He could have come back aggressively. He could have taken a swing. What's Socrates trying to do? Sure, what for example? So why not walk away and talk to the 3 kids later? What else is he trying to do? Well,
He wants to actually show him wrong, like wrong,
so to your example of the guy punching you in the face, which is a very reasonable one, what does Socrates' response seem to actually be? Not to punch back, but to do what? Take the punch and then talk with the person about why the punch in the face was wrong, in the hopes that tomorrow they're not going to punch somebody in the face. Now, will they? Will Thrasymachus be converted? Maybe, probably not. It's a lot easier to like convince people who are in their teens and 20s of new ideas than people in their 40s and 50s. But it's possible. Will, does this satisfy some of your concerns from Tuesday?
I think so. I think at least Socrates has like the right mindset. Like he wants his idea of justice is something that benefits everyone is way better than like, oh, it benefits just me. It's only for this specific people. Since we on the right track, that's where he's trying to go.
And to think of this as a prescription against the types of things that Thrasymachus had been teaching, it is at least a pathway to, well, I mean, in that regard, if Socrates converts the kids, who is he benefiting, and maybe even more than the kids themselves? Yeah, future generations, but also their slaves today, the women that they're going to marry, the kids that they're going to have, the people who are going to be under their care if they get elected to office or whatever. Socrates is trying to benefit everybody in Athens by trying to prevent harm from happening. We'll see how this goes. We'll see how the kids think about things on Tuesday next week. I had miscommunicated with Dr. Johnson for next Tuesday. Just read book 2. I think she had sent out a book 3 thing. It's just book 2. It's a little bit longer than what you read for today, but you also have the weekend. And then on Thursday we have a very short reading. But on Tuesday we're going to hear what the kids have to think about this. Thrasymachus is so embarrassed he does not talk again throughout the entirety of the rest of this book. He says they're embarrassed. Have good days, have good weekends, enjoy your long weekends, and I'll see you on Tuesday.